Hello again. So the Democratic Alliance has won Msunduzi, a highly contested ward, and that's Ward 28 in the by-elections in KwaZulu-Natal. The party's Renisha Singh won by nearly 60%, beating the ANC's Parusha Chetty. We're now joined by elections analyst Wayne Sussman to find out what this means. Wayne, good to see you. Thank you very much for coming in studio.
Thank you, Dudu. It's great to be on your show.
Maybe let's start with a little bit of an understanding in terms of what by-elections are all about and why they're important.
Very good. We are now in January 2023. We're also at the back of the ANC's national conference. And we're certainly on the road to the 2024 national elections. And we see a lot of opinion polls. We see a lot of people thinking what's going to happen, whether it's on Twitter or on social media. By-elections give us a particular snapshot of what certain parts of South Africa are saying. So yesterday we had by-elections in the predominantly Indian area of Bombay Heights in Northdale, which is north of the Pietermaritzburg city centre, and then rural northern KwaZulu-Natal and Mtubatuba. So we're trying to glean information. Are there trends we're seeing there which will give us insight of what's going to happen in the national elections? And is that impacting on governance in those particular municipalities as well?
Yeah. So let's talk about, we'll get to Mtubatuba in a few moments. Let's talk about Msunduzi and what led to the DA winning, especially when you talk about service delivery.
Yes, so Msunduzi, which is Pietermaritzburg, the provincial capital of KwaZulu-Natal, has had major service delivery challenges. This is a traditional DA seat. The by-election was triggered because the DA fired its councillor for sexual harassment allegations and other serious charges. I thought that the contest would be between the DA and its former councillor. The ANC actually had a very respectable showing yesterday. They were able to get its supporters out, particularly in the area of Bombay Heights, which is the far north of Pietermaritzburg. But the DA still held the ward. One thing to bear in mind, and we're sitting here in an air-conditioned studio, it was a sweltering hot day in KwaZulu-Natal, and that can impact on turnout. But it was a comfortable win for the DA, even though they lost some ground. They retained the seat, and the ANC, remember, the ANC struggled in Msunduzi in the local government elections and doesn't have an outright majority there and is dependent on other parties.
Yeah, and the ANC was actually quite confident that they would take Msunduzi. And you speak of Mtubatuba, what happened there? Because they also had a by-election.
Well, the ANC had to do well in Msunduzi yesterday because they failed to register a candidate in the Mtubatuba by-election. This was a ward the ANC won in November 2021, and yet they failed to register a candidate in a ward they currently governed in. This meant that the IFP had a very easy chance of winning the ward, and they won by an absolute landslide. Now, what's really interesting, when you drill down on those results in Mtubatuba, the ANC was the most popular party in that ward in November 2021. I wanted to look at, would turnout be drastically down because the ANC wasn't on the ballot, or would we see some ANC supporters come out and spoil their ballot because they weren't on the ballot?
Sure.
There was hardly any spoiled ballots, and turnout was respectable. So this is very encouraging for the IFP. Mtubatuba is also one of the most contested and competitive municipalities in northern KwaZulu-Natal, and the IFP's tenuous grip on power is now stronger today, so it is important. So we're not seeing much trends for 2024 because the ANC is not on the ballot, but on a local level, the IFP is more in control of Mtubatuba today.
Okay, we'll get into what you spoke about in terms of gleaning from the information, what this could possibly say about the general elections. But we've also got by-elections in rural areas and in Limpopo next week. Where and what are we looking forward to there?
Great. So often by-elections, whether it's an ANC or DA stronghold, are quite boring. But we want to see next week in Mbashe, which is the Dutwa area of the Eastern Cape, traditional ANC stronghold, the Blouberg region, which is towards the Botswana border, places like Aldays. This is where the ANC continued to run up the numbers in November 2021. One of the reasons why the ANC didn't do worse was because they did so well amongst rural South Africans. So we're going to see next week whether those two areas are going to continue to be passionate about the ANC and continue to turn their noses up against opposition. And Polokwane next week is going to be absolutely fascinating. This is a ward which the EFF has won since the 2017 by-election. They retained it in November 2021. It's extremely close. But not only is it going to be an interesting between the EFF and the ANC, we're also seeing Action SA, Herman Mashaba's party, contest its first ever by-election in Limpopo. So that's going to be fascinating to look at next week. Just one other quick point about Polokwane. A lot of people wrote the ANC off as just a rural party. That's why I focus on the 2 rural seats. Polokwane is one of the areas where the ANC won more seats than they previously had in 2021. They are increasingly popular in Polokwane, and they'll want to show that in places like Polokwane, it's not a metropolitan area, but it's the largest city in Limpopo, that in those urban settings, the people overwhelmingly back the African National Congress.
Sure. Wayne, I do wonder if your research touches into this or looks into this, right? As we speak, I mean, a task team is being established in Mpumalanga to look into political killings, but we spoke to a researcher from the Institute of Security Studies that is suggesting that, well, if we change not just the political system, but the way of governance, right, and the way of choosing councillors, saying that the bar is set very low. And so this could potentially, lead to these political killings. What is your understanding of these political killings, especially when we speak of these by-elections and people choosing their leaders now?
When one looks at the list nomination process for the ANC for the provincial and national elections, and you compare what happens from a violence perspective, and this is my personal insight, on a local government level, you see more violence around the local government elections because there's such contestation. To be a councillor in a place like Mkondo, Mkondo, formerly Piet Retief, in Mpumalanga, where we're seeing so much of this violence, is a middle-class position, a position which could give you middle-class security for the next 5 years in an area of increasing poverty. So that's why we see so much contestation. And sadly, not just in KwaZulu-Natal, we're now seeing it spill over to Mpumalanga, we're seeing it spill over to parts of Gauteng. We're seeing, historically, remember, this was violence between political parties like the IFP and the ANC and the UDM in KwaZulu-Natal. Increasingly now, we're seeing violence between ANC, people settling scores, and this is very worrying and unsettling. And we want to attract the best and the brightest across the length and breadth of South Africa to serve the public as councillors. And I wonder if the best and brightest would want to go into a profession where they might have to pay the ultimate price and lose their life.
Yeah, so this intra-party violence also bleeding onto the everyday person in South Africa because it compromises service delivery.
Correct. If you are going to be afraid to do your job, if you're going to be afraid as a councillor to speak truth to power, if you're going to be afraid to expose corruption in your ward or in your municipality because you might have to pay the ultimate price and your family's lives might be endangered, you'll be less likely to do that job properly. So I think in many instances, councillors feel afraid to speak out, feel afraid to bring those burning issues which are holding back service delivery, which are holding back creating an environment which is good for job creation. And this is very, very worrying. Violence is retarding service delivery. Violence, political violence, is retarding progress in many of our rural parts of South Africa.
Yeah. Wayne, so you spoke a little bit earlier on about the by-elections affording us an opportunity to glean information in terms of what we can read potentially into 2024, if anything at all. Initial indications say what?
So the IFP yesterday won a ward where it's an ANC ward, the ANC wasn't on the ballot. But politics is often about narrative. And we've seen in the last 3 rounds of by-elections, starting in Mtonjaneni near the Melmoth area in rural KwaZulu-Natal, to a by-election in eThekwini in Umkumas, where the DA stood aside to support the IFP. And last night in Mtubatuba, the IFP winning 3 consecutive wards in 3 consecutive rounds of by-elections off the ANC. The interesting circumstances, advantageous circumstances for the IFP in all 3, but they are winning seats, and a winner is a win in politics, and it's building a narrative that the IFP is posing a real threat to the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal, and that in 2024 a province like KwaZulu-Natal might be under a coalition politics government because the ANC is going to fall below 50% there. We are seeing the EFF did very well in the Ditsa-Bottler area in the Lichtenburg, in that troubled municipality last year. Are we seeing the ANC not just under threat in metro areas and in peri-urban large towns and small cities, but also in places like towns in South Africa? These are some of the trends we want to see where they're going to play out more and more in 2023, because that would greatly concern the ANC. With regards to the Democratic Alliance, are they a sure bet to win an outright majority in 2024 in the Western Cape? There are going to be some very interesting by-elections in rural parts and in urban parts of the Western Cape. So that's why we need to continue analysing the results and see what might likely transpire in 2024.
A number of analysts looking into their crystal balls are foreseeing a coalition government for South Africa, and not just at municipal level, but at national level in 2024, predicting that the ANC might not enjoy an outright majority. But politicians will tell you that a day in politics is like what, a year, and so a lot can change, right? So what are you seeing where that is concerned? Is it a possibility that we could potentially go into coalition governance in 2024?
We start 2023, and I alluded at the start, with two major scenarios hanging over this country and the ANC. The one is Cyril Ramaphosa winning his second term. The ANC presenting a more united slate. Yes, there was a slate, the Mkhize faction, which lost, but a new, interesting NEC full of young people, full of more people from the Gauteng province. That's the one narrative, that usually after an elective conference, there's a honeymoon period for the ANC. But then on the other hand, we're in a load-shedding crisis, where large swaths of this country are without power. If that second scenario, this load-shedding scenario, the service delivery collapse scenario continues, that is worrying for the ANC. But I want to remind viewers that yes, the ANC fell under 50% in the 2021 local government elections, but we know that they overperform in the national and provincial elections. We know that some of their supporters who stayed at home will hopefully, for the ANC's sake, turn out again. But if the ANC cannot show South Africans that they have solutions to the energy crisis, solutions to challenges in education, they might face the fact of having to look for coalition partners in 2024.
Wayne, always a pleasure. Thank you very much for availing yourself this afternoon. Wayne Sussman is an election analyst. Thank you.